I was in a trance party, when a friend come with some bottles of Belladonna. The people who drink it disappear, and everyone was afraid to drink it. One day later, I was in a friend house that keep the bottles. It was 0 o'clock when I and my two friends, Andre and Anthony, start to drink it. It was the first time and I said that it couldn't be more harder than liquid LSD, but 30 minutes after I start walking and I couldn't walk straight and I was seeing very bad. I get the car and go buy some cannabis. We smoked 2 bowls of it and I felt my mouth very dry. We went to a coffee, we drink some water, and more, but my mouth was always dry. My friend Anthony started to vomit. For about 30 minutes we were vomiting, until we got home. Me and friend were going to a park, but my friend that was driving very bad, we weren't seeing the road and for 3 times we get out of the road. I decided to stop. It was 4 o'clock and we started to trip very hard. I was seeing little people dancing in the street, the signs were balancing to right and then to left, every object was different, rock were dogs, trees were stone, everything was different. My friend start running from a dog but it was only his right leg. We start talking without any sense, were short phrases with no logic. I didn't understand anything. My friend disappeared and I find him talking to nothing. He said that he was talking with some old man. But there was nothing there. We get home, 5 p.m., after great hallucinations. I was walking home, but I don't remember anything. It was 6 p.m. and I was in a friend's car. I gave 1 pipe to a friend, but suddenly I woke up and I was in the police car driving me home. I got home and start to sleep. In that hour that I don't remember anything, I was trying to open a car that I thought it was Andre's car. I was talking to my friends that were in the car, but the car was empty and wasn't Andre's car. I tried and talked to every car in the street and police saw it, and thought that I was trying to steal the cars. In the next day I wake up at 12 o'clock, and I was seeing very bad and still stoned. I run into Andre's house and some images come. Andre's night. Andre was jumping in his grandfather's bed and running in the house. Anthony's night. He was all the night seeing people walking and talking in his bedroom. My night, 6 p.m. to 12 o'clock. My mother said that I scream and talk all the night. I got out of the bed and talked to my clothes and furniture. They tell me that I was talking to my shadow. All day night I saw pipes in my hand, and when I was going to summit, it disappeared. Belladonna is very hard. It's not of this world. I have seen things that were so real. Nothing compared to LSD. I think that drinking Belladonna we stay in a state that is not death and not alive. Be careful with Belladonna. I couldn't know what was real and what was fake.
I've always been the good girl. I don't smoke, I drink moderately, never try drugs. When I was 27 I was diagnosed with keratoconus, a rare genetic pathology that had already severely impaired my sight and, as they found out late, many therapies were useless, no cross-linking, no intrastromal implant, no mini-invasive transplant due to particular conformation of my keratoconus. When I was 22 my left eye dropped from 910 to 110, now it's 010 and right eye is worsening too. According to my last ophthalmologist, this sudden loss of sight on one eye caused an overload on the optic nerve, causing ophthalmic migraine with Awry when I read too much. As a law student, it was annoying. It fucked up my exam preparation as it occurred more than once a week, leaving me tired in the following days. I've visited many experts, they never gave me a solution for migraine, as they didn't know the origin, and then they didn't understand the specific problem and gave me a generic cure. They just prescribed me tons of painkillers, flunarizine, anxiolytics and antidepressants. They once believed I invented the loss of sight to justify failed exams. So, I tried to study my own case and maybe I found how to reverse the optic nerve overload. When I feel migraine with Awry coming, I still have approximately 1 hour before sight loss. As soon as I can, I assume some Belladonna and then lay down in the darkness for a bit or close my eyes. It almost always reduces my migraine and there is no Awry at all. It saved my life. So, when I need it, I eat 3 normal-sized berries, 4 if they are small, and I chew them very well, keeping them under my tongue before gulping. Bitter flavor is not a problem. I bought seeds from internet. Now I have a pretty big plant full of nice purple flowers and a dozen of newborn. Last winter all but one plants froze and I got new seeds to replace them. I put berries in the freezer in a Tupperware to save them. When I ran out of berries, I made a tea with a mug of hot water and leaves, and then I ate the leaves, but I found it less effective. The first time I used 2 leaves, then 4, then 6. I think 6 or 7 is the right number. Next autumn I want to make a tincture to have a constant quantity of alkaloid in every drop. My plants are small and they grow in a pot on a balcony. I would not follow these quantities if my plants grew wild, as they are more powerful. I've never used Belladonna for tripping and I have no intention. Side effects are very bland, and I'm not sure which part is caused by migraine and which part by Belladonna. Thirst is tolerable. Heart rate is almost normal. Dilated pupils arrive in less than 1 hour and get normal when I wake up next day. I also feel sexy with my big pupils, even if they are not completely opened. Sometimes my feminine parts burn when I first pee after assumption. Leaves give me stomach pain, berries don't. Weird dreams are the best part. I often dream of a huge, dark labyrinth made of rooms with wooden interiors and cheap furniture, a room after the other, full of people turning my back and disappearing in the other rooms. Sometimes I can have small talks with them, and when I finally find a window, the world outside is completely messed up. It's a good metaphor of my life, as I feel trapped, deserted by friends, and I see no hope outside my routine. I had about 25 experiences in 1.5 years.
This trip occurred 2 years ago in the summer, when I was 15 years old. I researched a little bit about the plant. I found out that all parts of the plant are poisonous, but I couldn't find any dosage information on eating the seeds. The main chemicals in this plant are tropane alkaloids, scopolomine, atropine, hyoscyamine. Many plants have tropane alkaloids, like datura, henbane, and European mandrake, but Belladonna is very high up in potency. So I ordered a 1/4 ounce of these seeds online, as they are legal. A 1/4 ounce comes with approximately 7,000 seeds. I decided to start off slow, with about 50 seeds. These seeds are very small, like the size of poppy seeds. I wasn't feeling anything after the 50 seeds, so I jumped to 200 seeds. I still wasn't feeling anything, so I went to sleep. The next day, I decided to take another shot at it. I started off with about 200 seeds. Waited about 2 hours and nothing was happening. I then took about 600 more seeds. I wait another 2 hours. I wasn't feeling anything, but when I saw myself in the mirror, my pupils were dilated almost to the size of my whole eyeball. Eye doctors use atropine to dilate pupils. I was getting mad because it was taking so long to start working, and I didn't even know if it was going to work, so I just downed about 900 more seeds. Me and 2 of my friends start walking to a firehouse fair a few blocks away, to check it out. I start feeling my motor skills decreasing. When we get to the fair, it is about 7 p.m. and we just sit down with a few friends for like an hour, just talking and watching the fair. After about a half hour, I get up and start walking. My motor skills just keep decreasing. I think the ground is shifting under me, like in one of those funhouse type things. I keep on tripping. Well, I am tripping, but tripping over the shifting grounds. So one of my friends and I decide to leave, because there are cops, and I was getting very messed up. So we went to a park around the block. We sit on a bench, and I decide to smoke a bowl of weed. I am incapable of packing a bowl, and I just get too tired to try anymore, so I put everything down, and going in a corner by some bushes. I start feeling the leaves and taking bites out of some, while my friend is sleeping on the bench. I don't know how long I was sitting by the bushes, but it seemed long and short at the same time. I wake my friend up, and she wants to go home. She doesn't know my part of the neighborhood well, so she asks me to walk with her. We start walking down the blocks. I'm just walking on the sidewalks, trying not to fall. I start climbing mountains, which were really just cracks in the sidewalk. I then come across a mushroom on the grass. It looked so amazing. My friend yells to me, and when I look back, the mushroom is gone. We keep walking. We've been walking in circles. I forgot where we were supposed to go, but we finally made it to my house, and we went our separate ways. While I'm at home in my room for a while, I come out into the kitchen to get a drink. My mother comes in and asks me who I was talking to in my room. I tell her it's my friend Dan, who was one of the friends I had over earlier. She tells me to ask him to leave, or she'll call his parents, because it's too late. I actually thought it was daytime, but it was really 3 in the morning. So I go back into my room, but I can't find him. My mom follows me around the house looking for him. I check in closets, in the basement. I thought he was hiding. I checked the backyard, and said there was a hole in the fence. That he must have left through the back. Now I go back in my room alone for a while. My mom then comes in my room for some reason. I tell her I can't sleep, because there are seeds all over my bed. She asks me to show her what seeds, so I start picking up nothing very carefully, and putting nothing into my mom's open hand. She then tells me to go sleep in her bed, but I couldn't in there, because there were seeds in her bed too. So I go back into my room again. After a while, I go into the bathroom, and start playing with the hand soap dispenser bottle. I would keep on putting it on different shelves, bring it into my room, and my mom would just keep moving it back. Later that night, my mom finds me hysterically laughing at myself in the bathroom mirror, saying that there is 3 of me. In the morning, I am still very out of my mind, so my dad tells me to get in the car. We start driving, and my brothers follow behind. I just thought that we were going on an outing. We finally parked and reached a big building. I told my brother I thought we were in California. I then told my dad that I was a vampire as I sucked blood from my finger, which really wasn't there. When we got into a building, I was taken into a room. It took me about 15 minutes to realize that I was in a hospital. I started going nuts. I started fighting guards. It took about 5 guards and my brother to hold me down. But I just submitted to them, because while the fight was going on, I saw a baby stroller in the room, and I accidentally kicked it, making me feel guilty, so I let go. I was then given a shot of a tranquilizer, I forget what it was called, and was strapped down to a stretcher and taken into another room. In this room, I could see out the open door, people that I knew from my school, but they weren't really there. I then was seeing scorpion-like creatures crawling and flipping over each other on the walls. I also thought I saw a laptop at the end of the stretcher, and thought it was mine, but I couldn't get it, cause I was tied down. I was then being pushed on the stretcher. A hole opened up in the wall and I was taken through a secret passageway, in circles. Obviously that wasn't real either. But I was taken to the ICU. There, the trip started getting harder. I thought that I was in a school auditorium, and a game show was going on the stage. And I saw a girl next to me that I fell in love with. I felt the love through my body. It was a blonde girl with no eyes. She was also deaf and mute, with electricity running through her completely black mouth. After a bunch of stuff I don't really remember, smoke canisters were thrown through windows in the auditorium, spewing smoke all over. I then snapped out. I was tripping for 3 days. I blacked out for a lot of the stuff, but my parents and brothers told me about some stuff that happened. I was put in a straitjacket that had ties from head to toe. I yelled and cursed at the doctors and nurses. At one point they had me wear a diaper, even though I wasn't going to the bathroom. They didn't want to give me a catheter, because they were afraid of what might happen. I had to be given baths. I was treated like a baby, because I was completely out of my mind and didn't know what was going on. My mom told me that when she went back home, she found a glass in the fridge with the top of a spray bottle in it. Also, the top of the soap dispenser thing was missing, and my brother found it in a tissue box. This was definitely the most intense trip I ever had, and I will never forget it. I might do it again, but not anytime soon. I am growing it now, to save it for the future. Overall, I ate about 1,500 seeds. And tripped for 3 days. I didn't really know I was tripping. I was just taken to a different world, and all the stuff that happened there was normal.
So there I was, working in the yard, culling the garden on the day of Halloween. My garden was overgrown with Belladonna, which is an invasive species of plant here in the Pacific NW. Soon my face and arms were covered with the deadly berries, juice and seeds, but I was not aware of it until later. By the time I was done whacking the garden, my arms and face were tingling with numbness and I was no longer on baseline anymore. I looked down at my body, thinking what's happening? And noticed the berry juice all over me. I dropped what I was doing, unplugged the weed whacker and headed for the shower, passing my husband on the way. I told him what was up and he asked if I was okay. I said yeah, but I need to get this washed off. By the time I got to the shower, my head was ringing with a high-pitched buzz and my eyes had a really hard time focusing on what was in front of me. I knew I was intoxicated with belladonna, which was something I had read about but never thought to try due to the severity of the reactions, and the fact that dosing yourself with deadly anything is just plain stupid in most cases. I reached out to the plant's consciousness as I had with mushrooms and salvia in the past, as I had with stones and herbs and other items, trying to connect. I connected with the spirit of the plant right away. Getting a distinctly feminine feeling from the presence, something feminist and strong, something very old and very dark, but with a sense of humor. I was having closed-eyed visuals, lots of teeth and golden eyes, angry snarls and again more golden-hued eyes, as in the iris or colored part of the eye was deep golden. I've seen and experienced eyes during my journeys with salvia and mushrooms, but nothing like these. I was very thankful that I had my wits about me still, that I wasn't in the full throes of a trip experience with this plant as she is dark. I got the distinct feeling not to shave or risk blood around Belladonna, that it would be very, very bad. Also no men, sorry guys. I don't think she takes kindly to men at all, or at least the typical masculine, jarhead stereotype. As soon as I connected with her, I had a flood of information about taboos with this plant and how to use it semi-safely. I was so excited I thought, I'm going to go get a spray bottle and start making a mix of water and fresh juice and seeds. But my guide, thankfully, spoke up with one word, seductress, and it all fell into place. I called Belladonna the name and she laughed a throaty, lusty laugh. I got the sensation of being pulled into a black vortex and happily giving myself over to it. Then all this information came flooding in. She is a dark goddess ally, something not to be trifled with, but with the kindliness of a sister, she showed me where one of my shadow traits was wanting more of everything good in life. More knowledge, more food, more sex, more happiness, more free time, more money, more, like a hungry moth that doesn't feel as though it gets enough. There was no sense of judgment in this brief evaluation of my dark goddess, just a glimpse from a different point of view, and it was easy to accept the knowledge for what it was. I asked her if there was anything else I should know. I said, what about everything else that's been on my mind, that I've been trying to sort though? Of which she responded with information on magic and how the magical or psychic abilities people have are everyday abilities for us. They are something we do all the time, but are not aware of it. The key is to engender awareness, not ability. Once you have the awareness you need, you can consciously choose to put those abilities into effect: healing, telepathy, energy warp, etc. She also showed me how any act of kindness can be a shadow trait, if the intention behind the act reflects that shadow. The example I was shown was someone who preached to a congregation out of the pomp it gave them as the preacher, not out of love for their flock. It didn't start that way, but once the shadow feasted on the adoration, it turned into that. Light turned to dark. All in all, if I were to visit with her again, I wouldn't approach her unless I was at the end of my moon cycle, after ovulation but before menses. I was told not to approach her while on my moon blood, something about two dark goddesses competing for the same space, opposing energies and all. Also I feel as though there was a kinship between an ally that was associated with the dark goddess and where I was on my moon cycle. As though if I attempted to contact her prior to ovulation, or too soon after, still in the mother phase, I would have had a much more negative experience. So many dark lessons on this one.
August 31, 2003. I had clipped a small leaf, about 2 inches long, 1 inch across, from my Belladonna plant, which at the time was in full flower. I set it on the desk to dry for a few weeks. This was probably an unnecessary step, but most dosages are described in terms of the weight of dry leaf, as the amount of water in a plant will vary. Weight as clipped from plant, 1 gram. Weight after drying around 0.2 grams. Over the course of the previous few days I had been experimenting with ripe belladonna berries. I started with 3 drops from a ripe berry with no effect. The following day I tried 5 drops, a few seeds, and a small piece of skin from the berry, also with no noticeable effects. I wanted to approach the threshold of effect slowly and cautiously, to avoid potentially lethal consequences. My mood at the time could be described as easygoing, with no real heavy thoughts or fears burdening me. I broke the leaf into pieces, and put it into about half a cup of very hot water to let it steep for a few minutes. I strained the leaf from the water and drank all the tea. The water turned a very pale shade of green/yellow, and its taste could be described as somewhat grassy. 45 to 60 minutes later I began to notice the first and most noticeable effect of this drug. It causes a very dry mouth and throat. Nothing you eat or drink can reverse this effect. I ate a bunch of ice cream, but it didn't help at all. My eyes also seemed to become dry, but my eyes did not dilate. About the same time, I began to get a half-buzz type body feeling, similar to that which you would feel if you had smoked a small amount of marijuana, or had a few drinks, but it was a small effect, and not extraordinarily worthwhile. Also, my fingertips seemed to feel swollen. Note, I don't know if this is related, but now, 3 weeks later, my fingers and hands are spotted with small, dry, painless blisters. This may be due to a virus I had a few weeks before, or maybe I am slightly allergic to some part of the belladonna plant. I detected none of the other characteristic symptoms of the tropane alkaloids while on this particular trip, which include dilated pupils, elevated body temperature, warm and dry skin, psychosis, delirium, and hallucinations, among others. I went to bed about 3 hours later and the symptoms were gone by the time I awoke, but I still felt a little tired the next day. It would seem that 0.2 grams of dry leaf is insufficient to produce a significant effect, at least for my body weight, 215 pounds. I think it's wise to start your dose very small and build up slowly, because there's no telling how potent that leaf is going to be, or how tolerant your body is of the tropane alkaloids. From what I've read, the lethal dose is not that much more than the effective dose. Belladonna, be careful. Today I found a forgotten bottle of belladonna berries that I macerated a year ago in some brandy. As I finally have some time to experiment, I have decided to eat one. It is 22:25 now. I might eat another in an hour if I do not see any effects. If you wonder why would 46-year-old male eat belladonna berries, I have tried to make an experience of all the Balkans plants. I have avoided belladonna for all those years because I have eaten couple of leaves as a child and was hospitalized after that for a few days. What I remember of that trip is, well, not much but agony. It is the time to make my experience with this plant a better one, I hope. I plan to stay at home and write the report as the time passes. Sorry for misspelling if some occur in the further text, it bloody well might according to my previous experience. The berries were picked in a mountain region of Velebit, Croatia. 22:57 I do feel a bit slower than usual, but nothing really tangible. I do make a bit more mistakes typing, but my senses are still just fine. I think I will have more of it in a little while. I do not plan to trip badly, the idea is to find the psychoactive threshold and be normal tomorrow. I do feel some heaviness in my hands typing. I have looked at my eyes, but my pupils are normal. Even a bit narrower than usual, which is strange because I have not used any other substances and belladonna should make them wider. 23:08 I do feel very slight nausea, but no other effects whatsoever. I have decided to take more. First I have examined my macerate. There are about 60 berries in about 1.5 milliliters of brandy. I shall eat one berry more and after that I might take some of that liquid, but I must be careful about it. Syringe might do the trick of measuring the quantity. The juice from the berries is dissolved in the liquid. 1.5 milliliter divided by 60 berries, 2.5 milliliter per berry. I will take 5 milliliters. That would be the 2 whole fresh berries in total. 23:22 I have eaten another berry. I do have slight physical sensations in my extremities, but it might be the placebo. I will wait with the liquid for another hour. The alkaloid taste in my mouth is strong, telling me to wait. 23:50 still no serious effects, a bit of the cotton mouth. I have measured my pulse to be 78 per minute, so I have decided to take the liquid and go to bed. It is a bit cold in the room. 0 o'clock I'm in my bed. I do feel a bit disorganized, I'm still fine. Listening to the jackals howling around the house is music to my ears. I'm having the liquid now. Cheers my jackals. I hope for some vivid dreams tonight. Jesus, it tastes bad. I do feel my temperature rising slightly. It is a pity I cannot measure it. I do feel my heart beating a bit harder, pulsating the blood in my hands, neck and legs stronger than usual. No psychoactive effects yet. 0:45 I have taken the liquid. 12:08 Yes, the night has passed. I have had such a blurred vision that I could not see the keyboard nor could I see what I was trying. 0:15 I am still well and I did not have problems reading and I can walk normally. 1 o'clock it is coming. My vision is blurred, I have trouble keeping the balance walking. I cannot read or write. I need to go and lie down. My body does not listen to my brain, and that brain does what it does. It is impossible to keep straight thoughts, One comes after the other and there is nothing connecting them. They seem to be chaotically random, not wrong nor delusional. My mouth is dry and I am cold. Probably because of the elevated body temperature. I'm having trouble covering myself. It is impossible to fall asleep. I had to go to urinate like every 10 to 20 minutes. I was stumbling in the dark, and had to hold myself to keep the balance. 4 o'clock I have managed to fall asleep. There was no strong hallucinations but my thoughts were seriously scrambled. 12:51 I was wakening to piss every 30 minutes until now. At the moment I am feeling the atropine wearing down. I still have to piss every half an hour. I think I have pissed out about a gallon of water. My vision is getting better but I have to use a magnifier to see the keyboard and my font size in Word is 40. It would be impossible to write other ways. My balance is more or less good now. My thoughts are much better too at the moment. The hallucinations during the night were minimal but present. General feeling was neither good nor too bad, but my body did not like it at all. I am aware that just one berry more would make me run naked through the woods. I do recommend caution taking this plant. It is unpredictable and takes long to absorb, about 1 to 2 hours depending of plant potency and the food eaten beforehand. The trippy part is comparable to henbane or datura, so this is not to be done alone, one needs a shepherd for this one. It can flip one's brain altogether. It is impossible to avoid what I do not see. I would not take it if I did not have a day or two to rest. This one will most definitely wear me off physically and mentally and my vision is going to be very bad for long. It was used as hunting poison for killing bears and as deadly poison for people. It was also used, where I come from, to get rid of guests that will not go home from some gatherings like weddings, added to wine to screw with drunken brains and produce chaos, people running away with no apparent goal, tripping badly. Addendum 2 weeks later. I can finally say my eyesight is finally back at its fullest. Damn long time to recover. I figured I would write this report on this particular opium formulation as it has become increasingly rare to be prescribed as narcotic pills are preferred by doctors. I had to go to the ER due to a spasm in my urethra, keeping me from urinating for 12 hours and causing immense pain. I was given 10 milligrams of oxycodone without Tylenol, a shot of half-grain morphine and then had a catheter inserted. The pain from the spasm itself and the discomfort caused by the tube in my penis caused my doctor to prescribe 5 milligrams oxycodones with half-grain B and O suppositories to directly treat the spasm. The effects of the drug were felt almost immediately, initially feeling like a strong hit of heroin. Because of not sleeping at all the night before, I nodded out for several hours with an intense body high and a floaty head. I have dosed again today and the formulation is strong enough that I haven't had to touch any of the oxy I was given. These pills are prescribed for increasing the time needed between analgesic shots as well as treating spasms. It is a very strong mixture that shouldn't be taken lightly. As a regular heroin user, even I could sense that these could cause an overdose quite easily if not used in the correct manner. Farm quality opium is very, very powerful. If someone is given these suppositories, I would say to tread lightly, and possibly save a few for historical purposes, as this method of dosing narcotics is becoming increasingly rare. Reported dose: 12 grain opium, 16.2 mg belladonna alkaloids. I have long been interested in the belladonna plant, so one weekend I decided I would buy some of dried roots of the plant and make a tea with them. One other friend of mine was also going to trip with me, and a third friend who was going to be our sober sitter. Make sure you have a reliable location to trip at, because this plant causes the most vivid hallucinations I've ever seen. I've experimented with several different psychedelics in the past: acid, 2CE, 2CI, 2CB, and mescaline, to name a few. But none of them adequately prepared me for this trip. Belladonna is not to be taken lightly, and you can very easily fall into a bad trip. However, if you just let the drug work inside you, it can be one of the most intense, in a good way, moments of your life. D0. 3:35 a.m. We first measured out 8 grams of the roots and boiled them in 2 cups of water for 25 to 30 minutes, basically producing 2 4-gram doses. Trust me, you want to drink as little as you can, purely because the tea tastes like dirt and sand. D plus 35 minutes. It took about 5 or so minutes for each of us to drink our cups. We felt nothing initially, perhaps just placebo and anxiety mixed with excitement. Tip: the awful taste can be remedied with food. I had starbursts, Yum, and by pinching your nose to cancel out some of the taste. D plus 50 minutes. My friend and I then smoked a couple bowls as we were waiting for the Belladonna to kick in, and by the time that we finished the second bowl, we could both tell instantly that the Belladonna was taking hold. D plus 1 hour and 20 minutes. The Belladonna was starting to make itself known quite effectively now, and many of the starting side effects I read about in other reports were visible. Blurred vision, random fits of laughter, may have been the weed at that point, very slight vasoconstriction in hands and feet. One thing I did not expect from this plant was the almost unbearable cotton mouth. Seriously, the dry mouth is hell incarnate. I recommend not eat anything while coming up, it makes the dry mouth so bad that it may cause a bad trip. Stay hydrated at all times during the come up. If you fail to consistently drink water, your mouth and throat will become dry to point of dry heaving until you drink something. D plus 1 hour and 45 minutes. At this point I lost all concepts of what was reality and what was a hallucination, but I will try my best to portray what exactly was going on with my body. Because I had been drinking so much water, I really needed to relieve myself, but simply getting out of my chair proved to be a somewhat impossible task. It took all the strength in my body to lift myself from the chair, and after I stood up I collapsed onto the floor, beginning to drag myself to the toilet. Once there, I became fully aware of how powerful this plant is. Inside the toilet bowl were millions of black dots scurrying all around. It actually became an entertaining game to try and knock them into the water with my urine. However, to my dismay, when I woke up the next day I found out that I didn't even pee in the toilet, just all around it. T unknown. This is where my memory of the night stops, and I completely submitted to the plant. I only have bits and pieces of my own memory, and my sober friend tried to fill me in on what happened. The hallucinations became extremely realistic at this point. Audio distortion was very heavy, and the visual distortion was to the point where I could not read anything. One thing I noticed was that the visual blur only affected letters/numbers, whereas the rest of the world retained, I use that word loosely, its normality. My brain became mush, and a powerful state of confusion washed over me, making mundane tasks such as getting more water almost impossible. I remember walking around my dorm thinking I was naked, and there were at least 10 people in every room. I didn't know any of them, but I was able to talk to quite a few of them. They seemed to ignore my nudity, and I understood this to be a sign of friendship. In my room there were 4 people I've never seen before, my little brother, and a hallucinated version of my sober friend, who at the time was actually trying to help the other guy was tripping off the floor. We all talked for what seemed like years, discussing many things from the Roman Empire to how butterscotch was made. At one point in the night I vomited all over the dorm, which I remember quite well. My sober friend was starting to freak out at this point, as he really had no experience with dealing with people who were tripping. He told me to get some paper towels to help him clean the mess. In my defense, the majority of my vomit landed in the toilet, but I let some slip out onto the floor before I could get there, and he sent me to the dorm kitchen to pick up his paper towels. Upon arriving, I could clearly see the roll of paper towels in a basket. I stared at the paper towels for what seemed like hours, watching numerous patterns race across them, making them change colors and glow with light. I then forgot why I needed them and went back to where my sober friend was, and upon my arrival he got angry because I didn't bring back the paper towels. He asked me why I didn't have them, and I told him that I found a basket and some tea, but Fooly Cooley wasn't there. The next thing I remember was being in my bed listening to Pink Floyd, listening to my sober friend yell that I was never to do this drug ever again. Lol. According to my sober friend, he heard me stop talking and moving around 8 AM in the morning, but because I locked myself in my room on accident, he couldn't check to see if I was doing okay. It is now 8:20 PM, and there are still very slight effects from the plant present and observable. My vision is still somewhat blurred, but only to the extent where it is noticeable, and as I write this report my vision is getting clearer and clearer. To wrap up, only take this drug if you are ready to descend into complete insanity. When the drug takes hold of you, you do not control how you function, it does. It's far more intense for me than LSD, or most other hallucinogens. Stay hydrated at all costs. I cannot stress that enough. I must say that after I found out what fucked me up I got pissed. I cut off my ties to that sick prankster. My friend was throwing a Halloween party. He said costume only, don't worry about drugs, alcohol, etc. My girlfriend already felt threatened by me going without her, since she had to work that night. The house was only lit up by black lights. We smoked a little bit of chronic weed to shake off the edge of a bad day. About 30 minutes later we all grabbed a cup and scooped some cold tea from the punch bowl. I cannot remember if it was 15 minutes later, or 45 minutes later, but I ran to the toilet bowl and puked my guts out. As soon as I felt the dry heaves fading, the floor was crawling. I heard many whispers, static voices, and faint screams. I opened the bathroom door and no one was there. I remembered everyone was outside in the backyard partying. When I got out back, everyone who was there either were laying in a comatose daze or were in small groups talking as if they were on helium. Laughter and crying erupted at the same time. I was in control. After messing with PCP, LSD, X, DMT, and various hallucinogens, I only felt like I was going to get sick again. Sure enough, I puked all the water I downed an hour later. Some girl who also lived here felt sorry for me and took me to her room. As I lay in a stupor delirium, she was forcing her tongue down my throat. I was too weak to push her off. I couldn't feel her giving me head. I couldn't tell if I was erect or not, but felt a cold tingling sensation when she sucked harder. She wiped her mouth off and asked if I liked the nightshade I was so fucked up on. Her eyes looked transparent and geometrical. I felt a weird rush, and this must have been 3 hours into the trip. I lost memory after that, but vividly remember puking constantly at 7 a.m. somewhere downtown and having a hell of a time finding my car. I rested the entire day and felt like I was going to die. I don't think it was cool not telling the guests what they were on. My experience was mixed. The aftermath isn't worth discussing. I lost a girlfriend over it. I also lost memory over it. Well, I'll start off by giving a briefing of who I am. I'm a high school student, a sophomore of the age of 17. I had been prescribed a drug called Belladonna, more than a year ago, which I used to settle an extremely nervous stomach. My thought process became too deep and I withheld all of my emotions, thus making me internally sick. Originally I took it at the regular dose, which I don't know. I believe there is only one regular measurement of it, in a pill form anyway. I increased my dosage from the most being 4 to 5 recommended in a day, a half hour before eating, to some days 7 to 8, back to regular, and a few days went to 12 pills a day. My pupil dilation was literally to the edge of my iris almost all of the time. Sometimes even in broad daylight. I found that at high dosages I became literally drunk. I also found that I had gained this hypnotic depressing obsessive quality. The Doors became my favorite band, being that a few of their songs are somewhat hypnotic and depressing, The End, Whiskey Bar, and Heroin. The Belladonna seemed to change me somehow. I have listened to The Doors almost 5 hours a day every day, mostly The End. I never grow tired of it and I never can seem to listen to anything other. Meditation. During the year I also experimented with meditating. I never had much luck just sitting there. Only occasionally I would manage to reach this state, mainly through the hypnotic influence of the barbiturates. But I discovered well in the shower under heat and the steam of the water. My mind fell more easily into this half-conscious form of state. I was partly asleep thanks to the hot sedating water, and the depressive quality of the barbiturates aided in keeping me that way. At the same exact time I obsessive concentrated on consciousness and deep thinking. I had reached extremely easily every time some form of state, where my eyes closed but still conscious at the same. Part of the time I seemed somewhat as if was hallucinating. Though I discovered there is some way to control exactly what I hallucinate. I couldn't quite explain. Sometimes my eyes were closed, other times open. Seeing either blackness or the water rushing by before my eyes, while simultaneously hallucinating. The only way I can truly describe how to control my hallucination was thinking about it and in some way just focusing my eyes. Not focusing them right seemed to break the hallucination and it would stop until I regained focus. I spent hours in the shower, 1 to 3 hours a day, normally only an hour. What I actually saw was quite different. Instead of being completely in dreamland, regular dreams or hallucinations seem to follow a strict form of jumping from one place, say in a movie, to falling and falling. This, however, was quite different. I couldn't really concentrate on seeing what was actually there without breaking concentration of what I was creating. A slightly more detailed description, in the hallucination itself or whatever form of place I had somehow constructed, was exactly what I was thinking. I could see and focus on that one thing, for example camera focus in and out from far away to close up. I could move around and bring whatever creation I wished to life. And for those who question whether I was doing hallucinogens, no, I have never done LSD, PCP and all of those trippy drugs. I strictly experimented with opiates and Belladonna. I've basically said all there is to say. I could create objects in my mind, give them mostly realistic qualities. make them vanish or interact with other objects. Like in 3D Studio Max. My vision. During 3 of my semi-conscious states I had no control, though I could still see and focus, but I could not move around like I should have been able to. I saw angels and was in this city. I'll say a few basic things. It definitely was not a hallucination. I spoke to angels and would love to write about it. My experience with hydrocodone, well, this one was most daring. My friends had take hydrocodone from its regular form of Vicodin. I bought 4 of these little blue tablets. They said only take 2. I of course took all 4 at the same time. Wow, it was a most memorable experience. Effects took about an hour to kick and seemed kind of long. I had brief hallucinations in and out, another semi-conscious state but very unfocused and unstable. The bug guys came in to remove bees from the wall. I was lying on the sofa partly seeing and taking it in. I heard the buzzing very loudly when they drilled holes in the wall. I had the strangest sensation of a whirling motion as if I were part of something electrical. I saw lights. Then woke partly up. I ran upstairs and took a steaming hot shower. I hallucinated about the ocean, drowning in and out of the hallucination, extremely unstable. I listened to the Doors a little later on that night. Glad was I that I ate a good bit that day. I began to vomit. Normally while vomiting I'd be spitting and scared to vomit. This however was easy, it seemed completely natural, and when I had to vomit out it all came. I just seemed to know when I needed to do so. Yes, my hydrocodone exps were all way after my visions. This was like midsummer. I had brief hallucinations of slitting my wrists. Some of vomiting, then waking up realizing it was a hallucination. I saw myself going to school and thought it was for real when in fact it was a hallucination. The same with my alarm clock. I didn't sleep at all until the vomiting stopped right as I began to vomit blood. In a little bit of a rush. Okay, my cocaine experience. I did 10 grams of cocaine first time I did it, and I did 10 grams in 2 weeks. OD'd about 2 or 3 times, merely stopped breathing then. It was absolutely amazing. I listened to Barbie Girl, I've no idea why, for 2 or 3 hours during some of the days. It was completely entertaining. Strangely I felt like I was alive, like I was a part of the song. I could work out more than I used to at first, but as I did more coke I began to become slower. I listened to the Doors song Heroin. I literally closed my eyes, and almost every moving song I just seemed to become a part of the song. I literally felt like I was on heroin, though I've never done it before. Just listening to the music. During the entire time I felt this tremendous tingling, like extreme pleasure in the front of my forehead. I felt wonderful and several times thought I would have a heart attack because I talked to myself so rapidly for so long and had problems calming down. Coming down, whistles. I knew nothing about coming off of cocaine. I got to tell you, it's not the best idea to go see the Passion of the Christ during that. I wanted to kill myself so bad for a day or 2. I cried and cried. I felt so terrible. I kept thinking about what would happen if I died or killed myself. I kept thinking about how if reincarnation existed, I'd be in this sea of pain for all eternity, and how I'd never see my family again, and everything I loved and experienced would be gone. Even the memories of them. My sanity was on the borderline for a moment there. The only thing that kept me in check was the question, why am I going to die or kill myself? Which I always came back to. Then the real pain began. I was sick for almost an entire week. The withdrawal effects were unbearable, diarrhea for endless hours. My Belladonna didn't help me then. I'll spare you guys the other nightmarish effects. Though I was used to it. My nervous stomach had caused very similar pain before, all the time, just never that long. I tried Belladonna last night on my own, and I agree with a lot of people. It is certainly not a drug to be taken lightly. I cannot emphasize that enough. But that's just my opinion, and this was only my first time. I put roughly 0.5 grams of dried leaf into 1 liter of boiling water for 10 minutes. I let it reduce to around 300 milliliters, a lovely piss color. I let it cool. The taste reminded me of green tea. 45 minutes later I felt a wavy warmth over my brain. I could feel it playing with my brain chemistry. Different synapses being opened and closed. 2 to 3 hours and I had a minor panic attack, because the dehydration was getting out of control, and I also felt really drunk. All drugs are toxic, but with Belladonna I felt physically poisoned. I had plenty of water, but it just flowed right past my throat, where I needed it. It's an extremely discomforting situation, and in that very moment I severely regretted taking Belladonna. I just wanted her out my body. Because of this, I'm a little reluctant to try it again so soon. I can't even begin to explain my dreams/waking dreams, or mystery objects in my room that I couldn't pick. My depth perception was simply not there. I tried to pick up things that actually existed in my room, Even tried to open doors, but my hand would go right through them. If I blinked they would disappear, and then suddenly I would be in my bed. The same happened with books, pens and paper. I was reading my book in bed, it was physically there in my hand, I was flipping pages, reading, then it just disappeared. I woke up the next morning with scratches on my stomach and chest. In between waking and dreaming, I hallucinated several family members who came to pay me a visit. They disappeared too, at a snap of a finger. I found myself talking to myself constantly, even when dreaming. It was absolutely random gibberish, mumbling. Should have recorded it. I was feeling very uncomfortable in my own skin. I threw up. My heart was pumping so fast. My penis shrunk to a far smaller size, to a quarter of its size, and it was difficult to urinate, not painful, just a real effort. Never could I fully empty my bladder. My choice of drug is cannabis and shrooms, and I've tried at least 5 or 6 LSD trips. I was expecting a eutrophic high from Belladonna, a connection with my surroundings, transcendence, but what I got from Belladonna was a vague wake/dream/drunk stupor. All I can say it was unusual, and that I have fear for this specific plant. I was in control of myself, but with a high dose I think I could have lost myself somewhere easily. Sure, there's the Belladonna high/drug effects, which are very curious and different, but I found it very unnerving and I wanted the drug out of my system ASAP. I felt I wasn't full there, like the plant tucked me away into a dark corner of my brain for a few hours. That's why they have sites. I really did feel the toxic effects in my cells. I polluted my ocean, and really the toxics feel heavy in my body and mind. It wasn't a good experience or a bad one, it was just the dehydration that was making me panic and this horrible sensation right underneath my skin. Mostly on my legs. I also felt a strong gravitation effect, which made it difficult to move. At that very time the dehydration was severe, and the opposite walls of my throat were glued together. Any higher dose, I believe I would have lost my mind. Half gram dried grams was enough me. In the future I think I may try it again, but that's a long way off. It really is a heavy poison. From this experience I've learned to not panic, it's very important not to. I was so close to physically sprinting to the local hospital 10 miles away for no logical reason, it was an urgent feeling to get help. I had to just try and take it easy, deal with my dehydration quickly and all the time, because I could have easily gotten lost and confused. Such a mind-altering experience, but I can't remember much of it. The Belladonna trip finished around 10 hours ago, it was in my dreams too. Side effects are a little rough however. Hot and cold flushes, nausea, sensitive eyes, my pupils returned to normalcy the next morning, fast heart rate, paranoia. Know myself and the plant first, moderate the dose. I think half a gram was a lot for my first try, but no means is it a recreational drug, I've been warned.
There is a lot of interesting history behind Belladonna. When my friend offered me a few leaves he had found while wandering around a neighborhood, I was very interested in trying it. 4 of us decided to do it together in an abandoned Coca-Cola bottling factory we were squatting. We set up 2 mattresses on the ground, some rugs, and rolled a ton of cigarettes because we figured we would be too messed up to want to roll cigarettes. We each ate a leaf or 2 of medium size in the early evening. I'm not sure how long it took to take effect because we kind of fell in and out of sleep, napping, and we continued that pattern all throughout the night. The squat is completely dark all the way in the back so we couldn't tell whether it was night or day for the entire trip. At some points we are all awake, talking, smoking cigarettes, and drinking beer together, passing them around to each other. Sometimes other people show up and bring more to drink. Sometimes someone drops a cigarette or drink and it's gone as soon as it hits the ground. We look around for it but it can't be found. Sometimes someone falls asleep for a little while and they look so peaceful they could be dead. Sometimes I fall asleep and I wake up, then 5 minutes later I wake up again, then 5 minutes later I wake up again. I lose track of whether I am sleeping or awake and it doesn't seem to matter. I lose track of whether I am alive or dead, but I feel good, not freaked out. I forget that I'm even tripping and just feel relaxed. At one point I get up to go out and go to the bathroom. I see people in the hallways, and then when I try to figure out what they are doing, they turn into graffiti on the walls. When I come back there are twice as many mattresses on the floor and they are full of sleeping people. I'm very frustrated because I want to lay down, so I lay down on the ground and sleep for a little while. When I wake up, there are only 2 mattresses again and only my 3 friends. I climb up on the mattress and find a guy lying on the ground next to the mattress. He kind of startles me and then I start to talk to him. We talk for hours. I start to fall in love with him. He seems to understand me more than anyone else I've ever met in my entire life. I feel like I'm going to explode. I'm so happy that I found this person. Then one of my friends asks me who I'm talking to, and when I slowly look back on the ground, he is gone. The next day when we get up around 2 p.m. we all feel pretty sober. We realized that no one had come over, we hadn't drank anything, and that all the cigarettes we had rolled were still sitting there waiting. We had imagined things ourselves and then by acting them out, made it possible for the others to experience it too. If I turned away for a second or stopped focusing on something, it disappeared. Anything I wanted to exist would, and anything that bored me would disappear. We went and got coffee when we woke up and felt completely normal all that day except that it was hard to read small print that day, it would get blurry like we were squinting. But the second day our eyesight was back to normal. I really enjoyed the trip. Everything seemed very realistic. As real as my dreams do while I am dreaming them. Any other drug I have done, no matter how fucked up I get, I realize that I'm feeling that way because I'm fucked up. With Belladonna, I forgot that I was on drugs. I didn't feel panicked at any point. I was able to sleep fine. The next day I was completely functional. My boyfriend tells me that Belladonna in small doses makes sex really feel good.
Current medications: 20 mg Lexapro, 25 to 50 mg Seroquel, for insomnia. All the legal herbals were obtained from an online vendor. My goal in this experiment was twofold. First, it is known that Belladonna was once used by women to induce mydriasis, dilation of the pupils. I wanted to find the minimum effective dose to achieve this. Second, I wanted to find out my body's tolerance to tropane alkaloids in preparation of a full-blown hallucinogenic dose. This goal includes exploration of side effects at a manageable dose. D0. Smoked half a bowl of Elverosa, wild lettuce, and sativa, marijuana, 2-to-1 lettuce to weed mixture. I was finishing off the bowl left over from the previous day. This is expected to have no noticeable impacts since the amount of C-sativa present was probably on the order of 15 mg or less. Consumed 5 ml, 1 teaspoon, of Belladonna extract prepared as follows. To 15 grams, half cup, of dry Belladonna foliage. Enough 80 proof rum was added to just cover the leaves. This mixture was allowed to steep for 2 days, occasionally agitating the mixture. The liquid was strained from the mixture and the leaves saved for further extraction. A drop of this extract was confirmed by tasting to contain tropane alkaloids. A sweet taste followed by a bitter taste above the taste of the rum was observed, which is characteristic of Belladonna. The literature indicates the total alkaloid content of the dry foliage ranges from 0.2 to 2%, with 0.3 to 0.5% being average. Of the alkaloid content, 87.6% on average is atropine, the balance being atropamine, scopolomine, and related compounds. Calculating the dosage as atropine, since this has the strongest parasympathetic effect, to the best of my knowledge, the dry matter contains 0.18 to 1.8% atropine, but a more realistic upper limit of 0.5% will be used. Hence, the total atropine content of the extract assuming complete extraction is 75 mg, and 15 ml, 1 tablespoon, of extract contains 9.4 mg atropine, not more than 37.5 mg in the highest upper limit. D plus 10 minutes. Smoke 2 bowls, 200 mg, of dry H. niger, henbane, foliage. D plus 40 minutes. Very slight mydriasis, perhaps only subjective, but contraction of pupils and accommodation reflex still working in bright light. I am still able to read at this point. An increased dose was administered in the form of a cup of hot tea spiked with 10 ml of Belladonna extract, 2 teaspoons. D plus 1 hour. Still very few noticeable effects. 1 bowl of Belladonna foliage was smoked. D plus 1 hour and 10 minutes. First symptom of reaction to atropine is observed as greater pupillary dilation and a burning sensation in the back of my throat, becoming quite troublesome as I tried to eat a candy bar. Effects are okay and not uncomfortable at this point. D plus 2 hour. I observe very great mydriasis and cycloplegia, paralysis of the ciliary muscle, resulting in inability to focus, to the point of being unable to see the exact extent in a mirror due to loss of vision. At this point, I feel uncoordinated and intoxicated, in a state of trance. Also, I start feeling the prickles over my entire body described in another account found on the internet. While the author who mentions this effect describes them as not unpleasant, I would say it is rather annoying. It made me want to escape from my body. This is the only part of this experience that really bothered me. I also had brief visual hallucinations where I would see someone out of the corner of my eye, but when I actually tried to look at them they weren't there. Much more noticeable were the auditory hallucinations. At one point, I was in the bathroom and thought my fiancé had let himself in and was talking to me. I also believe I experienced some sort of tactile hallucinations, which consisted of suddenly feeling textures. It's hard to explain, and it may in fact be due to the parasympathetic effects of atropine, i.e., a form of the prickles. D+3 hour. Smoked 2 bowls of C sativa to dull the unbearable prickly sensation that washes over my body in waves. This seems to be an effective remedy. At this point, my hands and face are flushed but my body temperature is normal, as confirmed by a thermometer. Around this time, I had a brief conversation with myself in the bathroom mirror. That was trippy. I didn't talk too long, but with a larger dose I am sure I would not have realized I was talking to my own reflection. D+17 hours. Pupils still dilated, though not nearly as much as earlier. It is possible to read, with some difficulty. To summarize, my experience was mixed. Even though it was trying, I will definitely do this again. Now that I know what to expect, I also want to attempt to separate the effects of H. niger from A. belladonna. When dabbling with tropane alkaloids I find it best to 1. Have a sitter who will monitor me to make sure I do not TOD. 2. Before I trip, make a list of the substances I wish to consume and the intended dosage if possible. 3. Have some MJ on hand. The list is to inform medical personnel what I have consumed should I need medical assistance, and should indicate the active principles, like atropine, scopolomine, etc., not just the botanical names. I also want to warn you that tropane intoxication sneaks up on you. I tend to dose up slowly because it is easy to overdose on these drugs. Smoking cannabis will deaden the prickles, but it is best not to get too stoned because the tropanes have already stressed the entire body. The plasma half-life of atropine is 2 to 3 hours, so you can estimate how long it will take to come down. My future work in this area is to produce a synergistic blend of C. sativa, A. belladonna, and H. niger, possibly cut with Alvarosa as filler, that will produce the trance state, and potentially hallucinations, but without the annoying prickles. Of course, I also want to take a larger dose of tropanes to actually achieve delirium, but I suspect I will need at least a full day to recover before returning to work. Another good idea is to procure an antidote to atropine to have ready for the sitter to administer if things are getting out of hand but not serious enough to go to the hospital. Physostigmine, pilocarpine, and reserpine are antidotes to atropine poisoning. I don't know if these drugs are available over the counter at a veterinary supply outlet, but physostigmine can be extracted from calabar beans, pilocarpine from various Pilocarpus, jabarandi, species, and reserpine from Indian snakeroot. The use of morphine to control some of the anticholinergic effects has also been described, though it and other opiates should be used with great caution because they provide only symptomatic relief. That is, it is possible to overdose on atropine and opiates simultaneously. If one becomes comatose or excessively violent, it's time to go to the hospital immediately. Tropane alkaloids are not illegal in the USA, so there's no need to worry about legal issues. Morphine, and analogs, and apparently THC can mitigate the negative effects of atropine, though neither is a true full antidote since they do not restore acetylcholine response levels. One should also be aware of the action of atropine, which is the harshest representative of the tropane alkaloids. Atropine is an anticholinergic, competitively binds cholinesterase at the muscarinic receptors, and this causes muscles that respond to acetylcholine to relax. The most visually obvious is pupillary dilation, but one that is not so obvious is bladder control. I have read reports of incontinence in those tripping on tropanes. While I did not piss myself, I certainly felt like I constantly had to pee. A larger dose than I took would probably induce incontinence. As a brief follow-up, one of my friends smoked 2 bowls, ca. 300 mg, in my estimation, of A. belladonna with no apparent effect. Roughly 45 minutes after administration of 15 ml of the extract outlined above, Mydriatic and cycloplegic effects were observed. At this point, he decided to go home, so I do not have data on his experience except that it appears the observed effects are due primarily to the extract. 15 milliliters of extract is equivalent to roughly 6.3 bowls, assuming the degradation of alkaloids from being smoked is roughly equivalent to the loss from incomplete extraction. During this time, I smoked 2 bowls of H. niger and 1 bowl of A. Belladonna, with very little, if any, Mydriasis. The only effect I noticed was a gentle calming, not a high by any means. One should be very careful with Belladonna and her solanaceous sisters. They are fun to play with, but they could stab you in the back if you do not show them respect. Let me start off by saying I used to trip acid as often as I could. Every summer my friend, same as in this story, would pick pounds of mushrooms and sell them like hotcakes, all while eating 20 to 30 caps a day and loving it. Neither of us had ever tried Belladonna before, and my friend knew where a couple grew. So on to the story. My friend R took off one night around 2:30 to 3 a.m. and picked handfuls of the plant in someone's yard. We went home and washed them, chopped about 10 leaves up and covered a frozen pizza with it, and split the pizza. It tasted pretty good, so we took the rest and made tea. R was rather enjoying his drinks while I occasionally took a swallow. I don't remember exactly what all we did, or when it kicked in good, but about 7:30 to 8 a.m., only guessing by time passed between then and seeing a clock at the hospital, I remember talking to several cops, and a couple paramedics, confused as hell as I had no idea what I did before or when they drove up. They were just there. I glanced over and saw R in handcuffs just as confused as me. I was still seeing wicked tracers and people's faces were all switched around, missing eyes, holes through their head. I was talking to who I thought was a detective, but the paramedic walked up and asked what I was saying and who I was talking to. I looked back at him and he wasn't there, he never was. They put R on a stretcher and in restraints, they had me sit with him for the ride. The whole way there I thought I saw the paramedics pull knives out and start cutting away at R. I sat there too stunned to even talk. I still don't know what exactly happened. The next thing I remember is the hospital. A nurse pulling my shirt off and sticking me full of IVs, 2 piss tests later and a blood test. They keep me in solitary with a bunch of needles and a life sign monitor on. Those stupid clips hurt. Apparently it took R hours there to even remember who he was, much less his name. I pulled the IVs out and started raising hell until they let me call someone to come pick me up. From what I hear, R was released a few hours later, still having mild psych problems. I don't know for sure though. Haven't seen him yet. Myself, it's been 24 hours since I left the hospital. My eyesight is still shot. I can't even read the computer monitor without glasses. Just 15 minutes ago I was outside smoking a cigarette and I saw a man in a black trench coat walk through my backyard. I pull a double take and there wasn't a damn thing there. The feeling of someone grabbing my shoulder has lessened, but it still happens occasionally. I heard when we were picked up, R was found skipping through the parking lot barefoot chasing butterflies. I can't imagine what kind of hell he went through, and I'm glad I don't remember much of the trip. It does things to you that even LSD couldn't touch on. It's not fun, it's not a blast, and it's not a game. I believe we should both be dead, and I consider us extremely lucky. I can't recommend it to anyone, unless you're trying to screw yourself over. Don't try it. I read hyoscyamine can help induce vivid dreams. I decided to try, so I ordered a pack of belladonna seeds from a local nursery. I had read another person's experience who said they had tried 200 seeds with no perceptible effect. Thankfully, I am conservative enough to start with minute amounts and I don't trust anyone's reports. I wanted to start with 20 seeds and increase by 10 each night until I realized my dreams, but I settled on starting with 10. I had a cold at the time and also took 2 extra cold tablets with phenylephrine. About 30 minutes later, I distinctly felt poisoned. I had tingling in my legs, and felt like I was losing the ability to operate them. They were quivering and weak. My vision blurred, and my body began dumping my liquids through frequent urination. My heart raced, and thumped. I took out my scale and weighed out 10 seeds. 10 seeds weighed 25 milligrams. I have read that 10 milligrams hyoscyamine is considered lethal, and 10 milligrams of atropine is incapacitating. Seeds should contain alkaloids in the amount of 4% of seed weight, but I felt much worse than what that amount should produce, so I estimated that if the seeds contained a whopping 50% alkaloids, which is impossible, the amount would be over 10 milligrams. but my situation felt serious enough to get ready to head to the hospital for an antidote. I waited it out though, and 4 hours later I was off to sleep. Scared myself and my wife. It's not a nice experience to feel poisoned. In hindsight, it was probably the atropine that made me feel like that. It has only been 6 days since my first, and last, Belladonna experience. Having read up extensively on this plant, I was quite excited to find a large bush of deadly nightshade at a local park, and as I grabbed a twig to examine the purple berries I squeezed the contents into my eye. It immediately began to sting. I licked my finger, stupid idea, and rubbed furiously at my eyeball. Before walking to the park, I had drunk around about 5 standard drinks, so I was pleasantly inebriated as I walked home after the incident with the berries. 15 minutes after absorption. As I walked home, I began to feel very drunk, my head felt extremely heavy and I was stumbling quite badly. However, I continued to drink when I got home. 30 minutes after absorption. My head is now extremely heavy, feel drunker than I've ever been before. Hallucinating very badly, I saw myself, my own body, and walked around myself and screamed at myself. Kicked at myself, which was actually a wall, then became disinterested as my phone was ringing. I answered and it was my friend. I told him via lots of screaming that I had eaten magic mushrooms and I felt funny. Then another friend rang and I felt out of control and I told her I had taken heroin. 50 minutes after absorption. A dog ran out in front of me. It was my old dog, which had long since passed away. For some reason I thought this was real, it seemed so real. My head was full of static noise as I followed my dead dog down to the park where I had originally taken the deadly nightshade into my eye. As I walked, my legs would fall out from under me, causing me to go crashing into the road, but my dog would always wait for me. Approximately an hour and a half after absorption. When I reached the park I was hallucinating widely, although it still seemed normal. I've taken a lot of hallucinogens, LSD, mescaline, DMT etc. quite a few times, but these visions were nothing like them. For one, they were a change of the entire scenery and to me they seemed real. There was lightning all around me, the sky was ripped apart and clouds sweeping by quickly, they were tinged with red. All around me, it's 8 p.m, the normally deserted park is filled with people, horrible gray shadows with back holes for eyes, there are thousands of them. The trees are dripping with blood and the ground is littered with body parts. These people are laughing at me, but I can only hear them in my head, they scream at me, horrible things about the universe coming to an end. I remember grabbing my head and screaming. Approximately 2 hours after absorption. This account is from my friends who found me. At this point I no longer have a recollection of what happened. I was found at the park, screaming in some unknown language at the top of my voice. I was deliberately hurling myself towards the ground, into trees and walls, and attempting to throw myself into the river. They called the ambulance, who then called the cops. They spent at least half an hour trying to settle me down, but I was too confused and violent. The police handcuffed me and tried to hold me down, but I threw them off. The ambulance officers shot me up 6 times with a sedative, which finally brought me down. I spent 3 days in an induced coma and 5 days in intensive care. This is where I woke up having no idea what had happened or who I was. The Australian doctors had never seen a case of belladonna or atropine poisoning before and decided that an opiate derivative and general anesthetic was a good treatment. Belladonna was a descent into absolute madness. To this day my vision has not recovered, blurry and unable to focus. Of all the drugs I've used, belladonna was the strongest and most terrifying. I would never recommend this plant to anyone who doesn't want to wipe themselves out to the point of dying. It wasn't trippy, enlightening and fun. It was the most horrific experience I've ever had before. There are far better, and safer, alternatives to this plant, belladonna. I wouldn't risk it.
I was 15 years old when I tried belladonna for the first time, and last until now, although when I did it, I was not exactly sure of what I was doing. I was in my mother's chemist shop, where I was working for the summer. It was at 2:30 in the afternoon when she went to have a lunch break and left me alone at the chemist shop. I knew she would return at 5:30 approximately. Generally, my mother trusted me, and of course, did not know that every time she left I would spend my time experimenting with explosive substances, like natrium in water, in the backyard, and gladly watch which would make the biggest bang. I would also try out essential oils and perfumes on my skin, and once, had found indeed an Alexidanyl, codeine, pill. So, there I was, once again, opening strange bottles of various substances and experimenting of their use. All of it seemed extremely amazing to my teenage eyes. Suddenly, in a back shelf I had never noticed before, I found 3 bottles. One of it was labeled Belladonna tincture, another ibogaine, and the last one narrowly essential oil. Not having a clue about what might be the first 2, I judged, brightly, from the third, that they must be some sort of perfume. Some information about belladonna had also dropped to my attention, like that the witches would use it for some sort of flying, and that the Roman ladies would put it in their eyes, to make them shine. So, I opened the bottle, which was never opened before, and smelled it a bit. The smell was beautiful, intoxicating, and rich. I decided there was nothing wrong with applying some tincture on my skin. So I did. I applied a lot on my arms and neck. It was at about 3 o'clock then. At about half an hour later, I started feeling tired and dizzy, although, as I hadn't slept at all the previous night, I accused that for my condition. In that state of mind, I wondered how would belladonna taste. I thought everything was okay as long as I did not apply belladonna in my eyes. Boy, was I smart. So, I put some on my hand and licked it from it. It had the strong taste of alcohol every tincture has, plus a bad, really bad, taste. I drank some water to make the taste go away. A bit later I felt cold. It was 30 degrees Celsius outside, but I thought at the time being cold was normal, so I put on my jacket and went to the couch to get some sleep. From that point and then, I totally lost count of the sense of time. To my mind, 1 second later, I decided I wasn't feeling sleepy at all, and woke up. I was absolutely certain that I had woken up and walked around the room. The room was filled with strange colors, that even now, I have problem to describe them exactly. For some reason I saw absolutely no problem with it. I continued walking towards the front room of the chemist shop, where the sales are made from, until now I was in the back room, where we keep the medicine in stock, when I suddenly realized that the ceiling was coming towards me. I took a better look and understood that my feet weren't on the ground, and that it was me that was flying towards the ceiling. I was extremely scared, thinking I would bang my head on it. Carefully, I walked to the front room, and to my biggest surprise of all, I saw my mother in work, having returned from the lunch break, selling medicine to some blur entities. I couldn't make out what they were. I was shocked as I was afraid of what on earth she was supposed to think seeing my flying above of her head. Of course, she did not see me. I took a look at the front clock, and saw the hour. It was 7:30 in the afternoon. Being sure that from lying on the couch till the time being, only 2 or 3 minutes could have passed, I actually came to realization of the fact that there was something terribly wrong with me. Having not such previous hallucinogenic experiences, I could understand nothing of my condition. I was certain everything was real, that I was not dreaming, or dead. From the point I saw the hour and then, I remember the shock, such as a shock from a fall, to returning into my physical body, feeling nothing but thirsty. I opened the tab and drank lots and lots of water. My skin was itching. I took off my jacket and my arms and neck was all red, maybe also from the alcohol or other substances in tincture that irritate the skin. I know not if I can plainly accuse belladonna of that. I washed off the smell with tons of water. To my surprise, when I saw my watch, the hour was indeed a bit past of 7:30. I felt petrified knowing that my mother would be here already, and I was curious as of why she did not know anything of my condition. Later, she indeed came in and told me that she saw me sleeping before and did not want to wake me up. Quickly I hid the 3 bottles, and when she saw the water all over me and the red arms and neck, I made up an excuse of having touched accidentally a plant in the garden, that is very similar with one I'm allergic to. She felt pity for me and sent me home with my dad and some antihistamine medicine. The 3 days that followed I cannot remember a lot besides that I was unwell, but manageably, and that my vision was blur. I stayed at bed with the allergy excuse. After at about a week I was okay, suffering from no side effects, and having tons of question marks inside my head as of what was it all about. I was fascinated by the reality I had witnessed and eager to do it again sometime, until I made some research for the plant on the internet and found out how toxic it is, and how lucky I was I only had the symptoms above. I also was extremely lucky that my parents did not understand, and that no one had any helpful ideas about taking me to the hospital. Some months later, I also asked my mother, telling her I randomly discovered Belladonna and ibogaine at the shop and asked her what were those. She told me that when she opened the pharmacy it was obligatory for all the pharmacists to have them, and she was uncertain concerning their use. For Belladonna she stated it was a kind of antidote to mushroom poisoning, and for ibogaine, that it was some kind of medicine for tropical diseases. Well, this was my experience. I certainly learned a lot from it, and if I could go back in time, I wouldn't change having had it. But I was much more responsible in the future with any substance I experimented with. I would be afraid to repeat the experience, after all I know for Belladonna now. I was lucky once, but I will not be always. As about my mother, I know not anything of her relationship with the substances. I truly tried to find out about it for a lot of years and from a lot of sources, but I did not come to any safe conclusion. When, after I had checked for the bottles in the back shelf, they were, of course, gone. Along with the narrowly essential oil, if of course this was actually the content of the bottle. It seems that mothers do indeed protect their secrets.
The plan. At approximately 7:30 p.m. I get a phone call from a friend, we'll call him GF, who told how he was curious to try Belladonna and wondered if I would trip with him. So with my experimental personality I instantly agreed. We met up around 8 p.m., acquired 9 large-sized flowers and recessed back to another friend's house to boil it into the tea. Approximately 1 hour and 3 bong hits later the tea was ready for consumption. GF and I split 1 liter's worth of tea in 2 and drank it on the spot. The tea oddly did not taste that bad, almost like an unsweetened green tea. Me, GF, and 3 other friends who were elected as our caretakers went to drop off GF's car at his house and planned to jump the fence into a park right across the street where our trip was to take place. At this point the initial effects began to surface, including a heightened sense of awareness and a dissociative feeling. The trip. We then made our way over the fence and deep into the darkness of the park where I found a bench and sat down. This was my last memory of consciousness. Before I could give a second thought I found myself sitting on the ground of what seemed like the park and I was smoking a cigarette that just kept falling out of my hand or just floated away. This little scenario kept repeating itself for most of my memory, until at one point I decided to take out my hair tie and let my hair down. As soon as my hair tie came off it fell to the ground and disappeared into a puff of smoke just as the cigarettes did. At this point I had no idea that I was under the influence of Belladonna. Next thing I remember, I was walking toward one of the caretakers who was standing about 10 feet away from me with his hands raised. I was curious as to why he was standing in such a manner. But the closer I got to him the more he morphed into a tree. Soon after I found myself riding in a vehicle down a street and it was daytime and I remember looking at the houses fly by when I noticed a very deformed human being in one of the yards, so I screamed to the driver to stop because I wanted to know what was wrong with him. I made my way back to that house where I noticed him standing there as he was before. I also noticed how badly deformed he was. He had disgusting, giant growths from the back of his neck all the way down to his ankles, and a very miserable look on his face, but when I made my way up to him he turned into the tree that consumed my friend at the park. After this I found myself at my friend Jessie's old house where she moved away from some time ago, yet there she was along with her grandfather who had passed away about a year ago. I remember that he spoke in the most horrifying, miserable voice and I couldn't bear to hear it. The next morning. Finally, I woke up in my bed the next morning wondering how I got there and feeling that everything I had just witnessed was nothing more than a long vivid dream. I also realized that I was smoking a cigarette and that I dropped on my blanket, but when went to fetch it, it was nowhere to be found, no smoke, no burns, nothing. It was at this instant I remembered that I had drank Belladonna tea that night. I then realized one of my friends, the one who turned into the tree, was in the room with me so we began having a conversation which lasted about an hour. My mother then walked into the room and asked me who I was talking to. It was then that I turned over, realized that she was the only person in the room and that I was still tripping. The imaginary cigarette phenomenon continued happening until I passed back out, which was like a 20 minutes time frame. The aftermath. All in all, It was a very different experience, and 4 never encountered any other drug that came within a mile of similarity. The only negative effects was the inability to read the entire next day, but thankfully that passed. Belladonna, by far the most intense drug I have experimented with, and I can't wait to try it again. I had first heard about Belladonna in Kurgan, Siberia. There was a local thrash metal band named after the plant, and their motto was "Many poisoned, few cured." A few years later, while crashing at a communal apartment western Wisconsin with several punks from across the state, one of the couples told me about experimenting with a tea made from the plant while in Texas. The girl was originally from there, and they were apparently turned on to the drug by her grandmother. The description they gave me led me to believe that it was something like a mix between a near blackout alcohol experience and an intense LSD trip. I managed to procure some foliage of the plant about a year later while I was living on the other side of the state with my girlfriend and my best friend. We were involved with some fairly sizable amounts of LSD and experimented regularly with a plethora of chemicals from cocaine to DXM to dimenhydrinate to ketamine, etc. We considered ourselves experienced psychonauts, and I had a particularly high tolerance to the drugs. This drug in particular was difficult to find information on, so we truly had to experiment with it. We used a coffee maker to brew the tea. We did not measure out a specific amount of foliage and just decided that we would measure by glasses. My friend and girlfriend only drank 1 glass of the tea. I drank 2 for starters. I was ignorant and arrogant, but figured that since I usually needed almost twice as much as anyone else when using other drugs, that the same would be valid with this. I understood that the drug was extremely toxic and potentially fatal, but I had taken dosages of several chemicals that could have in other people proven fatal and felt that my tolerance would somehow come into play with this drug as well. After a few hours I decided to drink a couple more cups of tea as I was not feeling anything. This I can only attribute to the fact that my judgment was already impaired by the drug. Shortly after this, we, for some reason, decided that it would be a good idea to split up. My girlfriend was feeling sleepy, so she laid down for a nap. My friend felt a bit queasy, and decided that it might be a good idea to go stay at his parents' house for the night, where he would have a little more privacy. I went over to another friend's house. For the next few hours, I simply lay back on my friend's floor, trying to shake the discomfort I felt. I could compare it to a slight overdose of caffeine. Eventually my friend went to sleep, and I lay on the floor convulsing all night long. I did not experience anything that I could have considered mind-altering or psychedelic. The next morning, my friend and his wife came and picked me up to spend the day with them. We went out to eat and I noticed that people were looking at me strange. I could not read the menu, and felt slightly disconnected. The next time I spoke to my friend and his wife, they explained to me that the whole time I was with them I shook and quaked, almost like I was having a seizure. I was unaware of it, and they told me they didn't tell me, because they figured that I was on something and didn't want to freak me out. They said that my face was sunken in and dark and that I looked very sick. I only felt a slight disconnection that lasted for somewhere near 48 hours after consuming the tea. During this time I could not focus on printed words, and was near the end of the 48 hours was starting to feel great concern. I thought I might never be able to read again. I didn't see my friend and roommate until a few days later. What he described to me could best be compared to a 3-day dimenhydrinate trip multiplied in intensity by 100. His mother ended up finding him in his underwear in the middle of the night talking to people who weren't there. My friend had spent a couple of years of his life institutionalized for schizophrenia, so his mother assumed he was going through an episode and brought him to the psychiatrist the next morning. He constantly referred and talked to people who weren't there. He did not seem alarmed or scared by what was happening and did not even remember that he had consumed the tea or that he had been expecting a trip. Unfortunately for him, he also had his first meeting with his new probation officer 2 days after consuming the tea, while he was still deep within the grip of the drug. He had to have his mother hold a pen in his hand and sign his name for him on his documents. Nobody expected that it was anything other than a psychotic episode for him, and his psychiatrist just raised his prescription. I saw my girlfriend the evening after we drank the tea. When I got home she was gone. She had went to work. When she came home, the first thing she did was tell me that when she woke up that morning she found our cat, cold, stiff and dead on the couch. She picked it up and held it for a while. When she put the cat down, she said it awoke from the dead and started walking around. At this point she believed what she was saying to be true. She had not even considered the possibility that she was perceiving this because of the drugs we had consumed the day before. I asked her about her trip and she said that after we left, all sorts of people she hadn't seen in a long time showed up at our apartment, and that there was a big party. She actually thought that both my friend and I had come back at some point during the night. She said she had a lot of fun. We later contacted virtually everyone she saw. Some were unreachable as she hadn't been in contact with them for years, and none of them had come over. Most of them were not within 200 miles from our apartment at the time. When she was at work that day, she thought that I came to visit her. She worked alone most of the day as a screen printer in a big shop, and that we had talked all day long. She said that her boss came in a few times and asked who she was talking to, and any time he did, she explained that she couldn't exactly remember. Only shortly after he left did I reappear, and she did not at the time, both when it was happening, and again as she was explaining it to me, seemed to understand how illogical this was. Eventually, over the course of the evening she started coming back to her senses. Never once as I talked to her did I get the feeling that she was tripping so much as she was delusional, but she was so calm that unless you listened to what she was saying, you wouldn't have noticed. Since our experiment, none of us have had any urge to try and repeat it. I myself did not notice any hallucinations or anything particularly strange at all. I feel very sure that I put myself and my friends at great risk of dying, but feel particularly lucky that I am alive to tell the story. I would recommend that anyone wishing to experiment with this plant exercise great caution. I would recommend doing some serious research into the toxicological effects of the plant and try to find out what is a reasonably safe amount before consuming any. I would also strongly recommend taking a few lower-level practice runs before jumping into it, and I would say that it is imperative that you have a sober sitter around, as it is very likely that if you come into contact with someone who doesn't know or understand what's going on, or possibly even worse if they do, that you will end up in jail or the mental institution. I would also recommend reading the trial statements, Testimony 1 and Testimony 3, of Charles Tex Watson of the Manson family, to get another interesting take on this plant. In 1989, when I was 19, I attended classes at a local college in the morning and worked in the afternoon at a local pharmacy in my town. At night I spent a lot of my time with two friends driving around town drinking, smoking pot and listening to music. Pretty normal small town stuff. One night we had been up to our usual hijinks when we were stopped around 11 p.m. by some guys who asked us if we wanted to try this stuff called Belladonna. I'd never heard of it, but they said we would trip out and it was safe, not, so I took a handful of the seeds and slowly ate them while washing them down with a beer. My two friends did the same. At that point in my life I felt a little indestructible like most teenage boys, and I really didn't expect much from some seeds. Era would note, driving while intoxicated, tripping, or extremely sleep deprived is dangerous and irresponsible because it endangers other people. Don't do it. My two friends and I carried on with our normal routine, driving around looking for a party or another group of friends to hang out with. We found a small party around 12 a.m. and we drank more beer and hung out for a while before we headed back to the car. It was at this point that I noticed a slight change in my vision and a feeling of something being not quite right. It was hard to put my finger on, but I blew it off as my being too drunk. This story I'm telling is weird because I didn't realize at the time that Belladonna differed from other hallucinogens I had tried before because I never noticed anything being very different or being overpowered by it. When driving home I saw things that sort of flashed and then were gone. A dog running across the street in front of our car and then disappearing before I could say look out. Strange things along the side of the road creeping out and then vanishing. I was dropped at home around 2 a.m. and my two buddies went their separate ways as well. I fell asleep and slept fine. When I awoke in the morning I got ready as usual and went to school. I thought the trip was over and was kind of disappointed that it didn't live up to my expectations. My class started and the professor asked us to open our books to a certain page as he taught, and at that point I realized that my vision was very blurry and I couldn't see to read or follow what he was teaching. After class I went to check my eyes and I noticed that my pupils were very big and I became slightly worried. Was this an after effect? I called my friends to check on them and they both told me stories I couldn't believe. Both had gone home and experienced very strange things. One had seen a deer in his room as he was trying to go to sleep. The other spent the night in his closet talking to the friend that was at home seeing deer. I felt sorta cheated because I'd had no weird experiences. But, they were to come for me as well. Belladonna can be sneaky that way. I went home and decided to lie down and read before maybe taking a nap. I always did this and then woke up for work around 1:30 p.m. I remember reading for a while, and at some point I looked across the room at an old TV set that was often sitting in the corner of my room. I realized I could see the reflection of my entire room on the glass screen of this television, and to my surprise I saw a small gnome-like figure walking about and sort of dancing in the middle of my room. I looked back to the space in the room where he would be in relation to where he was reflected in the screen, and nothing. No gnome. Just carpet with sunlight across it from a window. I looked back and forth from the TV to the room for what seemed like several minutes. And at some point this creature began to act as though he saw me as well. I have to reiterate that this didn't seem like a hallucination at all, but something magical and slightly dark. Definitely creepy. I left for work, eager to leave my room. At work I spent the day doing my normal duties. At some point in the late afternoon my friends from the night before came in and we talked about what a crazy night they had, and I told them all about the gnome in the TV screen. After they left, my boss approached me and grabbed me gently by the shoulders and stared into my eyes for a good 10 seconds. At the time I wasn't sure what it was all about. But I would soon enough. I left work around 5 and went home. I called one of my friends and we talked for a while. But when I brought up how they had come to see me at work earlier, the line grew silent on the other end. My friend told me that neither of them had come to see me that day, and it slowly dawned on me that it was all a hallucination, and that's why my boss looked into my eyes for so long. He was checking for signs of drug use. I had been talking to someone in the store that no one else could see but me. That blew my mind. I never did Belladonna again after that. I went back to safe stuff like LSD and mushrooms. At least on those I know when something is real or not. I recently had an experience with Belladonna, which didn't quite reach the delirium point. The trip was nice, but I wanted to lose it, so I grabbed 6 8-tropa Belladonna leaves and boiled them down in 2 liters of water until all that was left was 10 milliliters of pure dark extract. I was aware of all the dangers of taking this extract, but I set my mind to try it and lose myself completely. So I asked a couple of friends to join me. They hopped into the car and we left for the mountains, where not a soul was in sight. We smoked a couple J's and laughed for a while, and then I decided it was time. I grabbed a bottle and shook it to get all the white stuff that settled at the bottom to mix in well. I took a deep breath, put happy thoughts in my head and poured about 5 milliliters into a glass of water. I stared at the glass for a while. There was something about that reddish darkish liquid that scared the living shit out of me, but also persuaded me to drink it. Well, I finally got the nerve and swallowed it at once. Here is where it all begins. 40 minutes had gone by and nothing was happening, nothing other than the marijuana effects. I thought to myself, well, I'll make a joint, so I did, but added some magic powder to it, about 10 datura stramonium seeds, to give life a few more colors. I would soon discover I had prepared myself a lethal cocktail of drugs. I am not sure how long went by, but I started feeling different. My vision became considerably disturbed, cycloplegia, I felt like I was expanding, weird sensation, and my toes began to feel numb. So far everything was quite pleasant. Maybe 10 minutes went by, and things started to get really fucked up. I saw thousands of tiny dwarfs running around the sky, disappearing, which disappeared in invisible doors. After tripping out with the dwarfs, things started to get out of hand. I could no longer control my vision at all, and would find myself slipping in and out of different worlds and time frames. I was starting to feel really anxious and confused. My friends got scared and decided it was time to be heading back. Unable to drive, I gave the keys to one of my friends. Once on the road the effects seemed to be dissipating, but 15 more minutes would prove me completely wrong. I began to feel delirious and heavily confused, and asked my friends to stop for a little bit. I felt nauseous and tried to throw up, nothing would come out. I had fasted for 2 days before the experience. I felt really dizzy, the ground looked like it was coming up and about to hit my face. I couldn't stand up any longer, so I lay down on the seat. My friends asked me if I was okay, I answered no. Do you want to go to a hospital? And stubbornly answered no. They decided to keep heading down just in case. A few kilometers down the road I said to them, I think I took too much. The nausea was just killing me. I stuck my fingers all the way down my throat and finally got something to come out. Things got really unpleasant, all my happy thoughts were gone and dark negative feelings started to take over. My friends tried to help me forget about those nasty thoughts, but it all rendered useless. I started to feel my heartbeat rising very rapidly. Then it became a lot harder to breathe. I started to panic, very bad idea, and breathing became close to impossible. Confusion took over my brain, thoughts of death were lurking in front of me, then came the suicidal thoughts. I was feeling so bad and out of control that I wanted to kill myself and just end with the misery I was in. I said, very frantically, I am going to die. That's all I remember till we reached the clinic. I then recovered consciousness in the emergency room. I opened my eyes and saw blurry shadows, doctors and nurses, all around me. I fought them off for a bit, and fell back into a trance. I started to see dead people and talking to people the doctors could not see. A very beautiful female silhouette reached out her hand and I took it. We began to fly through the underworld. I heard voices that screamed help. There were special doors to enter a new level in the underground, each one revealing a more disturbing place. It was like going through Dante's Inferno. We finally reached what looked like firm dark air or something like that and stood there. I looked around and saw demonic creatures everywhere. I felt shivers and realized where I was. I had been lured into hell. I can't really remember anything else. Next thing I remember was waking up wanting to piss real badly. I stood up and felt an excruciating pain in my arm. I pulled out the IV in my arm, which I wasn't aware I had till then. I was still very confused but was glad the nightmare was over. Anyone who wants to try this psychoactive must be well aware of the dangers. A person could die if you don't treat this drug with the respect it deserves. One must also have a very strong and balanced psyche if one intends to go through the trip without losing their head or dying. Panicking is the worst thing to do if one begins to feel lost. I know it's easier said than done. I almost died, my friends. I was touched by death and Atropos, one of the three fates of Greek mythology. Her task, cut the thread of life, and atropa is derived from Atropos, spared my life. I was scared shitless by this experience and will not attempt it anytime soon. This last Saturday, me and my friend picked 4 leaves off a belladonna plant in my front yard. We boiled this in a pot of boiling water, and made 2 water bottles full. One for each of us. We drank 1 bottle each. We felt nothing after 30 minutes, I went home, and he remained at his house. I started tripping so hard when I got home, and my balance was completely off. This trip was not like acid. I have done acid way over 20 times, and this was too real. I first noticed I was tripping when I went off at the reflection in the mirror cause I didn't know it was me and I thought the person was mocking me. Then I kept putting my hand to my face and acted as I was talking on the phone, and in my mind I heard the other person too. I kept seeing people in my living room, and for some reason there were squirrels everywhere. Understand, I did not realize this was fake, this was completely real in my state of mind. At 3 in the morning, I got a phone call, a real one, from my friend's parents. He was in a coma. Apparently his parents came home to find him banging his head against the wall. He thought it was his pillow, and they pumped his stomach and he was in a coma until Monday. The hallucinations I saw were unreal, but at the same time seemed perfectly real. At one point I called my girlfriend at 4 in the morning to tell her I just got back from my stepmom's house and I was going back over there. My stepmom lives with me, and I had been nowhere that night. All in all, the trip was horrible, too real, too strong. The belladonnas I used were a string of plants brought over from Cuba, supposed to be the strongest in the world. The trip lasted 3 days, full effect, and I still do not have my vision back. My friend is okay now, he stopped tripping yesterday and his vision is pretty bad too. I advise everyone to stay away from this drug, this can and will kill you. If we drank one more sip each we both would have been dead. This is not something to fool around with. Be careful if anything, see the doctor list of things to do while you're intoxicated. Later, good luck for all you people who want to take this stupid risk. This is my first experience of belladonna. I am still relatively sane, so I'm typing this as I am tripping. Started tripping last night. Me and a friend of mine found a belladonna plant and took some home with us for me to try. My friend has done a lot of datura/brugmansia while I had never tried anything more than mushrooms and cactus. I'm not entirely sure how much we took, so I am estimating and saying we both took about 1 teaspoon worth of flowers. Then I left to go to a metal gig in town. While at the gig I had 2 bottles of Jim Beam and Coke, and we then went outside to have a pipe of weed. Well, not long after having the weed too, the trip started to come on. I was at the back of the audience with another one of my friends when I started hearing people talking behind me, and I would see heaps of people all standing there talking. The only person behind me was my friend, and she was too busy headbanging to be talking. I started to feel very claustrophobic, so I went outside to sit in the car park. By this time my heart was beating furiously and I wasn't sure if I was going to pass out or throw up. The trees across the road were swaying, then jumped up and down and went all over the place. Eventually we decided to head home. The trip seemed to abate a bit while I was walking apart from the odd minor hallucination, but when we got home I opened the front door and a gray and white cat ran out of the house and onto the footpath, then vanished. When I got inside I went to pick up a plate of cat food off the floor. I don't even have a cat. I went to sleep pretty much as soon as I sat down. Still feeling the effects slightly from last night, I decided to have another trip tonight, so my friend boiled the leaves and made a tea for me to take. I took that but didn't feel any effect, so we boiled the stalks and I took that too. That was about 2 hours ago. We then had some wheat. I'm feeling pretty good now. The effects are nothing too spectacular. I have had no memory loss or such like. I am still able to type this, though at times that does prove difficult as I keep seeing things that distract my attention and I find it difficult to tell the keys on the keyboard apart. I do not feel delusional. I am still able to realize what I am imagining and what is real. But the hallucinations are really quite fun. The ornaments and posters move. I have a wizard on the shelf that waves to me every now and then and a Grim Reaper model on top of the computer that whenever I look away, at the keyboard, he flies around the room. But when I look at it, it lands back on the computer again. Lol. I keep hearing noises and seeing things move out of the corner of my eyes. All in all, it has been a pretty good trip and I have many hours left of it, although I am feeling rather sleepy. First of all, I like to inform all that playing with Belladonna is like playing with dynamite. LSD, X, DMT are no comparison to atropine-based plants. With most these drugs, no matter what you see, I do not call for example LSD a hallucinatory substances. It causes severe distortion of sight, sound and mind. You are still aware that the plant or chemical are responsible for the effects. With Belladonna the entire concept of reality goes down the drain. The very fabric of reality will break down. You can be sitting down watching TV at one moment and next you see your dead grandmother next to you on the sofa asking for more tea. I am not kidding here. You will not know what is real and what is not. I personally took a bath with over a million insects and did not know that this was not real. You can be contacted by numerous alien entities, remember witches at Sabbath, using among many other things Belladonna, visiting Satan himself, that either can frighten you to death or make you touch an angel. Now enough scaring you. No, not enough. You can easily die, and I mean easily. I suggest to you to soak the Belladonna in the rubbing alcohol for a couple of days, and then evaporate the remaining fluid outdoor on the electric grill. Alcohol and flame oven or grill do not mix, until you get a gum resin. Start by taking about 0.2 gram of this stuff. Definitely have someone with you, have a number of a hospital with poison center available. Do not be afraid, Belladonna is not illegal. Last note, even seasoned trippers like Terrence McKenna are afraid of where a Belladonna trip takes them. As Terrence once told me, the places Belladonna takes you, you are not meant to go.